You're listening to 106.9 Shun FM, and today in the studio, I'm joined by Jess Abrahams to talk about the Platy Project, which is inviting the public to get involved in logging their platypus sightings in order to help conserve and protect this threatened species. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jess. I can see that you're out in nature right now, so lovely to have that there.
Yeah, in nature, in Parliament House, actually, in Canberra. So you can hear the currawongs calling in the background, but it's a beautiful spring day, and nice to be talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so what is happening at Parliament House? Is this to do with your conservation work?
Well, we're talking to politicians all about how to protect nature through strong environment laws and also about the extinction crisis that Australia is facing. We have more than 2,200 plants, animals, and ecosystems in Australia that are threatened by extinction. And iconic species like the koala, 20 years ago were abundant, ubiquitous. They became vulnerable and they're now listed as an endangered species. Now, that's a real crisis that we need to wake up to. Habitat for our wildlife is being bulldozed. But there's one iconic Australian animal, the platypus, that isn't on the federal government's threatened species list, but that's the platypus. But we're concerned that it should be. We know platypus numbers are in decline, but we just don't have enough data to prove how fast they are disappearing. And that was actually why we started the Platy Project with scientists at the University of New South Wales, because we want to gather the missing data to determine whether or not the platypus is endangered. We know in Victoria it's listed as vulnerable to endangered. We know it's declining in Western New South Wales and Victoria, but we just don't have the data to prove it.
And that's really the difficult thing, isn't it, with creatures like the platypus. The platypus is already a very shy animal. You're unlikely to spot it if you're being loud and making a lot of ruckus in a lot of areas. And so having that data, it's that catch-22. It really helps, but it's really hard to get that data. And if the data's not there, you can't prove that they're not there.
Yeah, look, it's an elusive species, but if you head down to a river or dam or stream at dawn or dusk, sit quietly on the bank, enjoy a little bit of time in nature, and just watch for the telltale signs. That might be a V-shaped ripple of platypus cruising along. Platypus dive down to the bottom of a stream or a dam and they search in the sediments for the little invertebrates, little insects that they feed on, but they can't eat underwater. So they come back up to the surface, they find a rock or a log or a riverbank, and that's where they don't chew, they grind their food inside their very sensitive bill, and then they'll dive back down and search again. So you might see some bubbles from the sediment being disturbed. You might see that V-shaped ripples on the water. But look, the observations of everyday Australians, farmers, students, nature lovers, anyone who's seen a platypus anywhere on a river, and it doesn't have to be recently, it could be a historical sighting. We'd love people to record that information on our Platy Project map. You just need to search for Platy Project in a search engine and it'll come up. And it's a really amazing map. You can look anywhere on the east coast of Australia where platypus reside, all the way from Queensland down to southern Tasmania and as far west as Adelaide once upon a time. And you can see both historic and recent platypus sightings. And there are, in fact, some around Armidale.
Yeah, yeah. It's I've seen a bunch of these sightings on the app as well. I went and had a look at it. It's nice that it's really interactive, so you can zoom in and out, and it's exciting to see places where you might be able to go to spot them a little bit. Especially here at the University of New England, we've got a lot of zoology students. So that is an option for them as well. But I'm really curious because this is the fourth year that the Platy Project has been running. What is the trend in the data over the 4 years? Have we seen an increase in sightings or a decrease?
Look, what we've managed to do with this project in the 4 years is actually find tens and in some cases dozens and even 100 or more sightings, recordings of platypus in areas where they haven't been seen either for decades or at all. So we have gathered data. We have shown that platypus are still in places that we were uncertain about. But the overall trend, the decline needed to prove whether or not they are threatened with extinction. That analysis, we will wait till the fifth year, the fifth and final year of the project next year to do that overall analysis. So I can't give you the trend line yet because we haven't done it, but it is encouraging to see that everyday Australians have responded to our call and are recording platypus sightings in areas where they haven't been seen for a long time. And if you jump on that map and there's a recording near you that might be orange or red, like basically a red or orange dot near you or a yellow dot, that means there's a historical platypus sighting. If you can see a green dot or a blue dot, that means there's a more recent sighting. And we want lots more recent sightings on that map because we'd love to know that platypus aren't, endangered, but our fear is that they are. So everyone can get involved in this. It's a really easy project, and it's a lot of fun, and it's great to be out in nature too.
Yeah, I mean, it's relaxing, right? You get to be out there, you get to see the animals, and you get to connect a little bit with the land. There is one thing that I've seen for this year, which is an initiative to get farmers involved, particularly in sort of the northern tablelands region. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how farmers can contribute to helping the platypus project and platypus in general?
Sure. Look, farmers have got a huge role to play in conserving nature and biodiversity across Australia because farmers manage more than 50% of the Australian continent. Um, we know that while we can protect platypus in places like national parks, we're not going to save platypus altogether just within protected areas. There are the areas outside our national parks and reserves that we also need to maintain their habitat. So if you're a farmer with a dam or a stream or a creek that runs through or adjacent to your property, what you do on your farm, the clearing, the chemical use, the quality of the streamside vegetation will all play a huge role in determining the health of local waterways and the likelihood that platypus can survive. In some senses, platypus are like the canary in the coal mine for our farmlands. If rivers are healthy and clear, the chemical load is low, the sediment load is low, there's lots of microinvertebrates like small insects like damselflies or dragonfly nymphs in the water, there's a good chance you'll have platypus. And that's a good sign of farmers managing their land in a way that's compatible with nature. And we know most farmers are doing the right thing. But we also have seen some really terrible examples of land clearing around the Armidale region, places where the habitat of some of our most endangered species, like the Regent honeyeater, were bulldozed illegally without permission under national environment laws. And we have real concern that if land clearing continues at a pace, that habitat for not just the platypus, but all of our threatened species will continue to be lost. So it really is, farmers have got a great role to play. Most farmers are doing the right thing, but there are a few bad apples that can sometimes spoil the crop.
And I guess there's something of a little bit of fear as well that I've heard from in instances not necessarily related to platypus or animal conservation, but with the finding of um, fossils or archaeological things on their site. There's that fear that their land's going to be taken away or that they're going to not be allowed to continue to do agricultural things on their land. So for farmers who might have that fear of, oh, I've spotted a bunch of platypuses in my river, this means I can't, do land clearing or, I can't have animals in this region in case it ruins the riverbank. What sort of support is there to ensure that they're
Yeah.
able to continue their practices without
Yeah.
further potentially
Yeah,
damaging that
sure.
riverine
Well,
system?
yeah, yeah. Look, if farmers are doing the right thing and they still have platypus in their local waterways, probably means that they're farming in a really sustainable and nature-friendly way, and they have nothing to fear. Um, and in fact, the health of biodiversity is a really good measure of the sort of sustainability of farming practices. So, look, I do hear these comments as well, and I even hear these from people in semi-urban areas that find a platypus, in the creek at the bottom of their um, semi-rural block, and they don't want to report it. But look, our environment laws don't work that way. Just because there is wildlife, it doesn't prevent anyone from doing anything. And in fact, we need to understand more about nature and also how to farm and use land more sustainably. So we can't do that without accurate information. So I really encourage anyone to share the information they've got, so then we can all make really good decisions about how we manage and care for our land and our wildlife.
Yeah, and from a practical perspective, for people who live in areas near, rivers or dams, but maybe they're not on their property or they're on national park or crown land, what are some things that people can do in their day to day life that can help to protect those systems?
Yeah, look, I think it's always what you do on your land, even if it's adjoining a protected area. Downstream effects are just critical. Um, Excessive clearing, sediment into rivers, chemical runoff into rivers, they're all going to have downstream effects on our wildlife. If farmers can maintain habitat for wildlife on their property, they'll increase the amount of pollinators, native insects. That's been proven to be good for farming, requires less chemical input. So there are tons of things that farmers can do that are good for farming, but are also good for nature. If you're in an urban area and you're not so lucky to have a bush block to look after, what goes into our waterways in our cities and towns, whether it's litter or, oil from cars, all sorts of things, it washes into our waterways, into our creeks, and eventually, into our oceans. So we all have a role to play in looking after the environment, keeping our waterways healthy and making sure that habitat for platypus remains intact. But look, something easy you can do: go down to your local creek or waterway, dawn or dusk, search for a platypus. If you don't see one, record that too, because it's a lack of a platypus sighting that helps scientists as much as an actual positive sighting does too.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is the fourth year. Next year, the fifth year will be the final year of the project, and from there you'll go into wading through the data, as it were. What are you hoping to do once that data has been collated and presented in the future?
Yeah,
Is the
sure.
Platy project
Look,
going to
yeah,
continue?
look, the goal of this project, we, along with our scientist partners at the University of New South Wales and other environment groups, submitted the platypus to be assessed as a threatened species by the federal government's Threatened Species Scientific Committee. This was 4 years and 5 years ago now, and literally the answer we got back is we can't assess the platypus because there's just not enough information to do so. So thus the project was born: gather the missing data. At the end of the project, we're going to resubmit the nomination for the platypus as threatened species, and we hope that the data we've gathered will be determined, help determine either way the health of this platypus. But this species. But beyond the Platy Project, beyond the 5 years, there are other groups who are doing fantastic platypus work. And my hope is that the online map that we've created will live on, and other groups can use it to continue to gather data on this iconic, elusive, mythical creature.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would really like to
Sure,
have listeners
sure.
know?
Sure. Look, springtime is a beautiful time in nature, but it's also the time when young male platypus are hitting the waterways in search of a mate. Female platypus are releasing a pheromone, signaling that it's time to mate. So spring is the best time to see platypus on the move. So use this beautiful time in nature to go out and search for platypus, and let us know what you find by using ACF's Platy Project interactive map.
Yeah. And for everyone who is interested in joining in on that project, I will include links in the show notes, and they'll be on our blog and social media as well. It's as simple as like just said, just searching for the Platy project, and you can investigate it yourself. Thank you so much for
Great
joining me
talk.
today, Jess. Yeah, it's been really great talking to you, and best of luck with Parliament House today.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash. Great talking to you and the listeners.